When they saw the spacious rooms and the elegant decoration inside, everyone was stunned again. They even didn't dare to walk inside, but stopped at the door. They had actually been to such a spacious and well-decorated house before. It was Gu Qinxiang's house. However, when they had gone to his place, they had felt very nervous and had no idea how to behave. If they had had another choice, they wouldn't have gone to Gu Qinxiang's place. Of course, Gu Qinxiang also disliked them. Please feel at home. Don't be nervous at all. Come on in. I'll tell you everything. Gu Ning put down all the stuff. She pulled Gu Man and Gu Qing while walking to the living room. Gu Qing was still a little nervous, while Gu Man relaxed a lot, because she knew that her daughter had bought this house. Although she didn't know why Gu Ning would buy such an expensive house, she chose to believe in her daughter. Jiang Su and Jiang Xinyue followed slowly. Please have a seat, Gu Ning said, but some of them still stood. It seemed like they were afraid to dirt the sofa. Have a seat, please. Gu Man sat down calmly. They all sat down afterwards but felt uneasy. Aunt, uncle, do you still remember what I said last Sunday? If I become rich, I will definitely let you live a good life, Gu Ning asked. Hearing that, both Gu Qing and Jiang Su kept staring at Gu Ning. They didn't realize what had happened. Apparently, they remembered Gu Ning's words, but what did Gu Ning's words have to do with what was happening now? They couldn't believe that Gu Ning would become rich within such a short time. Therefore, Gu Ning told them what she had told Gu Man. The family of Gu Qing were all amazed by the story. She had rescued a man, gotten 10 million yuan, and even planned to run a business? I've said it before. Once I'm rich, I will definitely let you all live a good life. Now it's time to fulfill my promise. I bought 2 houses of the same size actually. The other one is right across from this one. This one is for me and my mother. The opposite one is for your whole family. Since I didn't tell you in advance, I couldn't get all the required documents. Please bring your household register and marriage certificate here tomorrow. After we finish the procedure, you can move in directly. The house is well decorated as well. All you need to buy are daily necessities, Gu Ning said. A long while later. Am I in a dream? Gu Qing asked. It was so hard to believe it. She immediately pinched Jiang Su's thigh with great force. Jiang Su shouted in pain. Gu Qing asked him, does it hurt? Try it yourself, Jiang Su said. He wouldn't have shouted if it didn't hurt. Gu Qing glared at Jiang Su. She absolutely wouldn't do that to herself. Ah. Both Gu Ning and Gu Man couldn't help laughing out loud. It's real. Ning said that she wanted to wait to tell you till she bought the house. So we all kept it a secret, Gu Man explained. But the houses here aren't cheap at all. It must cost a lot to buy one here. Gu Qing said confused. They were poor and hadn't finished their education, but it didn't mean they knew nothing. Actually, Gu Man was also confused about that. Gu Ning hurriedly explained. Well, I'm going to open a jewelry business, so I went to City G this weekend to buy raw jade materials. However, the raw materials are all covered with stone layers. There are piles and piles of them. No one knows which one actually has jade inside. Thus it's generally a gamble. Whoever cuts jade out from the raw materials can sell it on site. It's super hard to get an emerald though. I don't know whether I was lucky or something. I bought 5 raw materials, and fortunately there were 3 high-level emeralds in them. I sold one which in the size of an apple, and earned more than 20 million yuan. I used that money to buy the houses. Besides, as for the other 2 emeralds, I'll leave one for Muka's company, while the other one will be used to make jewelry for all of you. Before they could recover from the last shock, they all were shocked once more by Gu Ning's words. What? More than 20 million yuan? This was the first time they had ever known it could be so easy to make money. After a long time they finally recovered. Ning, you're so bold to play stone gambling.
Gu Man criticized Gu Ning gently.
She was more worried about her daughter. She had heard of stone gambling. It was a highly risky business. One could either become super rich or poor overnight. It was too dangerous. Mom, don't worry. I know how to handle it. Gu Ning immediately comforted her mother. Well, Gu Man didn't know what to say. She still chose to believe in her daughter. Gu Ning had made a lot of money. The family of Gu Qing also felt happy for her. But she gave them such an expensive house, so they all felt a little awkward. Ning Ning, I know you're being kind, but the house is too expensive. Gu Qing opened her mouth. She wanted to reject it. Aunt, I know clearly how much you've helped me and my mother ever since I was a little girl. Please accept it. We're a family after all. I can't see you all live a poor life any longer. Gu Ning interrupted Gu Qing. Indeed. Please accept it. We only have each other now. We're family, Gu Man added. Everyone was upset suddenly. True. They only had each other now. The rest of the Gu family disliked them and kept a distance away from them. Great, Gu Qing answered at the end. She burst into tears with happiness. Mom, can we live in such a nice house from now on? Jiang Xinhua asked with anticipation in her eyes. It was understandable that everyone wanted a better life. Gu Qing and her husband felt a little guilty that they weren't able to provide a good life for their daughter. Yes, we'll live in such a nice house after tomorrow, Gu Qing answered with love in her eyes. Having the affirmative answer, Jiang Xinhua was so excited that she almost jumped up. Wow, it's so great. Seeing Jiang Xinhua being happy, Jiang Su and Gu Qing as her parents were also happy. Alright, it's almost 8 p.m.
I'm starving.
Mom, Aunt, please cook dinner for us, Gu Ning said. Oh, it's almost 8. We need to cook now. Gu Qing immediately left the sofa and pulled Gu Man, running to the kitchen. Gu Ning wanted to discuss something with Jiang Su, so she didn't go to help. She also stopped Jiang Su, who wanted to help. Uncle, can we have a talk? Gu Ning asked. Sure, Jiang Su answered, but he asked Jiang Xinhua to go help. Uncle, since we're not poor any longer, I naturally don't want you to continue doing labor work for so little money. Of course, I know you can't stay unemployed. I also don't want to see that. In the past, we could only live a hard life, but now we can live a better and better life. So I want to ask you, do you want to start a thriving business and improve our lives in the future? Or you simply want to run a small business? As long as you don't have to be hungry or cold, no matter what you want, I can fully support you financially, Gu Ning said. Jiang Su wasn't clever or cunning enough. He probably wasn't capable of running a business. However, he worked hard and was diligent. He also liked learning. As long as he was determined, Gu Ning trusted that he could truly make something. Jiang Su was delighted to start a company, but he felt awkward about the money. Gu Ning had already given them a house. He felt utterly embarrassed if he asked Gu Ning for money as well. Gu Ning also knew what was on Jiang Su's mind. She encouraged him. Uncle, no one respects us only because we're poor. You're the only man in our family. You must be strong and powerful to protect us. Gu Ning only said that to comfort Jiang Su. She had no intention to reveal her other properties before she could do better than the Tang family. It needed more than money to surpass the Tang family. Money didn't mean everything. She also needed power and support from the authorities. It was hard to force an official to leave his position with money, but it was much easier to ruin someone's company with power. Therefore, a good network was very significant. Thus, Gu Ning planned to network actively in the future. Jiang Su was touched. What Gu Ning had said affected him a lot. Exactly. Only because they were poor, no one respected them. Especially Gu Man and Gu Qing. They had been despised and discriminated against by the rest of the Gu family for a long time. As long as Gu Man, Gu Qing or Jiang Su himself were powerful, the Gu family wouldn't dare to do that. Jiang Su was immediately full of passion, but he was still embarrassed about the money. Uncle, I know that you are worried about the money. If that's the case, I can help you with money and you can give my mother a 20% share of your company. My mother of course won't work in your company or interfere in your business. You need to work hard yourself. Please don't underestimate the 20% shares either. If your business grows bigger, 20% shares will soon be equal to the money I give you. So just take it as I lend you the money and do not feel any pressure, Gu Ning said. Although Jiangsu was almost convinced by Gu Ning, he was still a little worried. What if the company isn't profitable? It happens in business. Nothing good comes without risk. You don't need to worry about the money at all. I can totally afford it.
Gu Ning sai țințăreli.
She was unbelievably confident. Yes, she could afford it. She didn't want Jiangsu to do the same thing as her. Her goal was to build a business empire with billions or hundreds of billions in assets. As long as Jiangsu could be successful in City F, several hundred million yuan would be enough. Thus, Gu Ning planned to invest 10 million yuan into Jiangsu's business. She had several hundred million yuan in wealth. She could completely afford it. Although Gu Ning wouldn't interfere in Jiangsu's business, if he had any trouble, she would never step aside. Gu Man and Gu Qing heard the talk between Gu Ning and Jiangsu in the kitchen. Gu Qing was already crying in happiness. Ningning, she's such a great kid. Yes, Ningning is doing this for our good. We can't disappoint her, right? Gu Man said on purpose. Gu Qing immediately understood what Gu Man's purpose was. She walked out talking to Jiangsu. Su, please accept it. We must be strong and powerful. No one is going to take advantage of us anymore. With Gu Qing's support, Jiangsu was now fully convinced. He answered at once, "Great, I'll do it." Actually, he had always had the idea to run his own business, but lacked the money. Actually, I have a friend who invited me to do the business of construction materials together. I really wanted to join him at that time. However, because I didn't have the money, I gave up at the end. In 3 years, he already has millions of yuan in wealth. His wife and children all live a good life. Honestly, I'm very jealous of him, Jiang Shuman said with embarrassment. Construction materials? Hearing that, Gu Ning's eyes lit up. It was a good idea. Gu Ning planned to be involved in real estate industry, and construction materials would be highly important to her business. It would be better if her uncle could help. I think it's a good idea. Uncle, I agree with you to do the business of construction materials. I'll invest 10 million yuan, Gu Ning said. What? 10 million yuan? Hearing that, Jiangsu was astonished. He thought 1 million yuan would be enough. He didn't expect it would cost 10 million yuan. Uncle, since we're getting involved, why not start a bigger business? Don't be a chicken. Gu Ning encouraged him. Great, Ningning, I won't let you all down. Since Jiangsu had made up his mind, he decided to do his best. And you can quit your job too. Whether you want to help uncle or be a housewife or open a small shop, you can choose. Besides, women need to take good care of themselves. We were poor before, but now we don't need to worry about money at all. I won't go to school tomorrow. After we finish the legal procedure of buying a house, we can go buy skincare products, clothes and jewelry, and then get our hair done, Gu Ning said. In case Gu Qing would refuse, Gu Ning immediately added, Aunt, you can't reject that. We're family. We need to support each other. Since they were family, Gu Qing couldn't reject. She said, Fine, I'll listen to you. But isn't it inappropriate that you don't go to school tomorrow? Gu Ning was already not good at studying. Gu Qing was afraid it would affect her studies if she asked for leave. It's just 1 day off, it'll be fine. Besides, we can only finish the procedure on a weekday, Gu Ning said.
Fine, Gu Qing compromised.
As for Gu Man, she now believed that her Gu Ning was able to handle her life and studies. Oh, I also bought clothes in City G for you. Let me bring them out for you now. Saying that, Gu Ning walked to the second room. She needed to take those gifts out of the telepathic eye space. Really? Gu Qing didn't know what to say. They were all moved by Gu Ning's kindness. Gu Ning brought many bags from the room, placing them all on the sofa. Gu Qing immediately pulled Gu Man to go have a look. I bought a gift for everyone. This is for Uncle. Gu Ning put a bag before Jiang Su. Then she gave Gu Man and Gu Qing a bag separately. These two are for both of you. Gu Man and Gu Qing immediately took the bags. Xinhua, this is yours. Gu Ning gave the last bag to Jiang Xinhua. Jiang Xinhua took it and thanked her. Thank you, sister. Gu Ning didn't take hers out. Wow, this is Lancome. It must be expensive. Gu Qing couldn't help but raise her voice in surprise. She obviously knew Lancome was a famous and expensive international brand. This is Armani. Jiang Su was also amazed. He always dreamed of having a good suit, but he didn't have enough money to buy one. Now Gu Ning sent him a much more expensive suit. It's Gucci. It's so beautiful. Gu Qing was surprised and excited. She kept holding it against her body and asked Gu Man, "What do you think?" "It's beautiful."
Gu Man smilet.
She looked at the clothing in her hands. She also loved them. Although they had none of the vanity, as women they also loved beautiful clothes. The dress is so pretty. Jiang Xinhua raised her voice with excitement. There are phones. Finally, everyone discovered the phones at the bottom. They got excited once more. I have a new phone. Jiang Xinhua almost screamed. The rest all pulled out a new phone from the bottom of their bags and unwrapped it. It's so lovely. Exactly. Everyone held their new clothes and new phones in their hands. They could barely put them down. What's that smell? Gu Ning smelt something, then immediately ran to kitchen. Gu Man and Gu Qing immediately followed her. They forgot to turn off the fire. Luckily, it wasn't too late. Gu Ning had an acute sense of smell, so she discovered it early. When Gu Ning was finally free, she checked their Family of Fighters WeChat group. Everyone mentioned her in the chatting history. They all cared whether she was back or not, with their gifts of course. Gu Ning shook her head lightly. She typed and sent, "I'm back at home, but I won't be at school tomorrow. I'll give the gifts to you all the day after tomorrow." How ran. "Boss, what happened? May I help?" Muku. "Yeah, what happened?" Gu Ning. "Nothing, I need to deal with something with my mother and my aunt. Please keep it between us, and don't let the teacher know." How ran. "You mother left the hospital? Why didn't you tell us earlier? We could have gone to pick you up and celebrate." Zhang Tianping. "Exactly." Gu Ning. "It's fine." Chu Peihan. "How about our gifts?" Everyone. "Yes. What did you buy for us?" Gu Ning. "You'll know the day after tomorrow." "Alright, I need to have my dinner now. Bye-bye." Then Gu Ning ignored them. It was the time for dinner. Actually, it was 9 p.m. already, so they were having night snacks, but everyone enjoyed it so much. After the dinner, it was almost 10 p.m. Gu Qing's family soon left. They had a lot to do, so Gu Man didn't ask them to stay tonight. They left their clothes here though, since they would be moving in tomorrow. While they were leaving, Gu Ning reminded them just to bring everything important with them tomorrow, and to leave the other stuff in the old house. They could sell the furniture later. Moreover, Gu Ning also told them not to tell the rest in the Gu family. They wanted to live their own lives. After Gu Qing's family was gone, Gu Ning and Gu Man went back to their own rooms. Gu Man intended to let Gu Ning use the master room, but Gu Ning refused to do so. Gu Ning wouldn't be staying here for too long. After half a year, she would be going to the capital city. By then, she would buy a new house under her name. Gu Ning also had no intention to let Gu Man move in with her in the future. Her mother could come and visit her if her mother wanted to. Once she was in the capital city, the situation would be complicated, so Gu Ning didn't want to involve Gu Man. Gu Ning hadn't brought too much stuff from the old house the other day. They didn't have many valuable objects either, so she had dumped all the old broken stuff. Gu Ning planned to live a brand new life. Gu Man and Gu Ning talked for a long while before they went to bed. It was almost 12 p.m. Gu Ning checked the WeChat group again before she went to sleep. Her friends were still talking, but she stayed quiet. Both Gu Man and Gu Ning had a great night. Gu Qing and Jiang Su, however, didn't sleep at all. They were too busy thinking about what had happened today. Su, do you feel unbelieving about what happened tonight? Gu Qing asked. She hadn't fully recovered from the shock. It felt like they had been on a rocket and had gone up high into the sky directly from the ground. I do, but it is real, Jiang Su answered. Ning Ning is totally different now. She just said that she would let us live a good life last week. And she fulfilled her promise this week. It's so surprising, Gu Qing said. Exactly. Ning Ning has been being a completely different girl ever since she had the car accident. She has suddenly become mature, independent, outgoing and confident. She behaves nothing like an 18-year-old girl, Jiang Su said. He was a little ashamed that he didn't have power like Gu Ning. After a while he added, no matter what, it's a good thing that Ning Ning changed. She now knows how to fight back. The Gu family has broken Ning Ning and her mother's heart. They have even kicked them out of the old house. Luckily, Ning Ning is powerful now, or they would live a harder life. Indeed, if they knew Ning Ning is rich now, they would be envious. They would probably try to have a good relationship with a rich Ning Ning. Those people are sick. Gu Qing had seen through the rest of the people in the Gu family. We must be low-key in front of them. Don't cause any trouble, Jiang Su said. They didn't fall asleep until 3 o'clock in the morning. The next day Jiang Xinyue got up to go to school. Gu Qing and Jiang Su were awake too. It was still early, but they couldn't sleep anymore. They were so thrilled to move into a new house. Gu Qing told Jiang Xinyue to go straight to Fenghua Luxury Mansion when she left her school today. Jiang Xinyue was also excited to move into the new house today. Although they were going to move out today, they weren't in a hurry to get their deposit back, because the lease of their old house wouldn't be ending until the end of the month. Gu Qing went to work as usual. She had already written her resignation letter last night. She planned to ask to resign when she got to work. Gu Qing was just an ordinary worker, so it wouldn't make any difference if she resigned. Thus it was very easy for her to resign. After her resignation, Gu Qing called Jiang Su. They went to Fenghua Luxury Mansion separately. They did not live far away from Fenghua Luxury Mansion. It only took more than half an hour to get there by bus, but if it was rush hour, it took around an hour even by car. There wasn't a direct bus there, and Jiang Su was also pulling 2 big suitcases, so it wasn't convenient for them to take a bus. They ended up taking a taxi. Gu Ning made it a daily routine to get up early. She got up around 6 o'clock this morning and went to have run downstairs. She had run for an hour with 3 breaks. After she caught her breath, she called her head teacher to ask for a leave. It was not easy to ask for a leave as a senior in a high school, except if it was a special situation. Gu Ning then lied to her teacher. She said that she was on her period, and it hurt so much that she couldn't get up. Her head teacher was a woman too, and she understood how painful it could be. Thus she agreed. Gu Ning felt a little guilty, but she had to ask for a leave today. Gu Ning finished her run before she went back home to take a shower. At that time, Gu Man woke up. She was still a little confused when she found herself in the brand new house. Gu Man got up to prepare breakfast. When it was almost 10 o'clock, Gu Man received a call from Gu Qing saying that they had arrived. Gu Ning let her mother tell them to wait at the sale department. They would be right downstairs. 10 minutes later, both Gu Ning and Gu Man went downstairs. Gu Ning had called Wei Zhiruwei before, so he was already waiting at the sales hall. The minute Gu Ning and her family walked in, Wei Zhiruwei welcomed them with great passion. Gu Qing had already made her choice of the house, so she directly told Gu Qing and Jiang Su to take out their documents so that they could finish the legal procedure. After that, Gu Ning paid the money before they got the key. Wei Zhiruwei also gave Gu Ning's key back to her. Gu Ning had given the key to him because she had asked him to get an hourly cleaner to clean her new house. When Gu Qing and Jiang Su received the keys and the property ownership certificate, Their hands were trembling. They had never believed that they would own a house one day, even though the house was a gift from Guning. They all went back home with the suitcases afterwards. Wei Jirue felt touched while he walked Guning and her family out. She was such a great kid. She not only bought a house for herself, but she also bought a house for the family of her aunt. They must be very close. They went back to the 9th floor, building number 2, Zone G, and stopped at number 906, which was Gu Qing's family's new house. They opened the door and walked inside. Although they already knew what it was like inside, they were still amazed by what they saw before their own eyes. Gu Qing's family walked all around with excitement, like children at Halloween. Let's have a meal here first before we go out,
Guning sighed.
Then they walked out of number 906 and stepped into number 901. Gu Man and Gu Qing went to cook together, while Gu Ning and Jiangsu were talking. Uncle, do you have any difficulties in starting the business of construction materials? Gu Ning asked. She didn't want to interfere in Jiangsu's business. She just cared about it. As for the materials, I plan to go to the construction materials market today and have a look. As for the manufacturers, with a 10 million yuan fund, we naturally will only use the best. I'll look up on the internet first later before I contact the manufacturers, Jiangsu said. Very well. I'll transfer 1 million yuan to you then. You can go buy a car. We don't need to be too high profile at the beginning, so 500,000 yuan would be enough. You can buy it directly in your name. Also buy a computer for yourself. The rest can be used as the deposit to find a store, Gu Ning said. After the meal they went out. Gu Ning had intended to let Gu Man and Gu Qing put on their new clothes, but they refused because they hadn't gotten used to it yet. Gu Ning didn't force them to. Took time and she understood. There were many banks outside of Fenghua Luxury Mansion. So Gu Ning transferred 1 million yuan into Jiangsu's account. She then also transferred 1 million yuan into Gu Man's and Gu Qing's cards separately. Gu Qing tried to reject. She thought she had received too many things from Gu Ning. It was 1 million yuan after all, which was too much in Gu Qing's eyes. However, Gu Ning persuaded her to accept it. Gu Qing was now more than moved. Jiangsu couldn't start his business in a short time. Besides, it took time to run it properly. They didn't go to work during that time, and were without other sources of income, so they could only rely on their savings. Both Gu Man and Gu Qing had never had such a huge amount of money in their accounts. They seized their cards in hands tightly, in case it would be lost. Jiangsu went to deal with his business, while Gu Ning along with Gu Man and Gu Qing took a taxi heading to the commercial building in downtown. Gu Ning proposed to buy clothes first, but was stopped by Gu Qing. Ning, you already bought us clothes yesterday. We don't need to waste more money on clothing. It's not enough. My mom and I have dumped all of our old clothes. We also need to buy new clothing. Relax, we're not going to buy the designer brands, but some common brands. Gu Ning comforted. They didn't need too many luxurious clothes. Luxurious clothing was only for important or special occasions. In daily life they could wear ordinary clothes. People wore designer brand just to show off. Many medium-level brands were also of great quality. Gu Qing listened to Gu Ning at the end. They went to a medium-level brand of clothes to shop for Gu Man and Gu Qing. Even though the brand was just medium-level, it was still a luxury for Gu Man and Gu Qing because they had never been to places like that. Therefore, they were intimidated when they stepped in. Gu Man and Gu Qing weren't wearing good clothes and seemed poor, plus both of them behaved in an unconfident way, so the saleswoman assumed that they couldn't afford anything. Thus she didn't even bother to greet them. Gu Ning ignored the saleswoman. She guided Gu Qing and Gu Man walking around casually. If they liked it, they could buy something. If they didn't like it, they would leave. Gu Qing chose a piece of clothing. She turned the price tag and was shocked. Gee, it costs 1,800 yuan. 1,800 yuan was her salary for half a month. Although she knew the clothes Gu Ning had bought for them cost much more than that, She still, though the price was too high when she saw it with her own eyes. Meanwhile, a sarcastic female voice sounded. If you can't afford a 1,800 yuan piece of clothing, then don't ever step in here. Look at what you're wearing. You only deserve cheap stuff. Gu Qing felt utterly embarrassed. She lowered her head in shame. Gu Ning was upset. She looked to the woman, which was surprisingly familiar. Gu Ning lifted the corner of her lips. She looked evil and called, "Oh, isn't this Miss Jean?" The woman heard Gu Ning's voice. Her face changed immediately. "Who are you?" I don't know you." Gu Ning was now sure that the woman must have gone to get her jewelry identified, given that she was being so diffident. If her jewelry had been real, she would have been mad to see Gu Ning again. "Don't you remember? It was last Sunday in the jewelry store." Gu Ning reminded her on purpose. "Shut your mouth." The woman panicked and interrupted Gu Ning. "What's wrong?" At that time, a woman in her early 40s dressed in an extravagant way walked over from the other side. Her eyes rounded when she saw Gu Ning and her family. Both Gu Qing and Gu Man were surprised and felt uneasy to meet the woman. Gu Ning squinted her eyes with coldness. The woman was Lin Lijuan, Gu Xiaoxiao's mother. "Gu Qing, Gu Man, what are you doing here?" Lin Lijuan asked in surprise. It was beyond her imagination that Gu Qing and Gu Man would show up here. In her eyes, they always wore cheap stuff from the street stalls. Gu Qing and Gu Man didn't want to talk to Lin Lijuan at first, but they were relatives after all. It wasn't appropriate if they ignored her question in the public. Accordingly, Gu Qing said airily, "We're just here to have a look." Gu Qing didn't want her to know that they were here to shop. In front of Lin Lijuan, they preferred to pretend to be poor forever. "Oh, I thought you picked up money on the roads, and you dare to walk in a place like that." Hearing that, Lin Lijuan suddenly changed her tone. She didn't bother to hide her complete disdain. "Lin, do you know them?" the woman asked. Yeah, I've told you about them before. They're my sisters-in-law." Lin Lijuan sneered. It seemed Lin Lijuan had badmouthed Gu Qing and Gu Man often behind their backs. The woman immediately looked at Gu Man and Gu Qing with intense dislike. But since Gu Ning was here too, she didn't dare to laugh at them. "Gu Man, you were brave to move out from the old house, rather than apologize to us." Although Lin Lijuan was still mad at Gu Ning, Gu Man and Gu Ning had paid for their behavior. Thus she wasn't as annoyed as before. But now, seeing that Gu Qing was with Gu Man, Lin Lijuan believed that Gu Qing must have let Gu Man stay with her. She was immediately irritated. "Gu Qing, did you let Gu Man stay with you? Our mother has made it clear. If you dare to let Gu Man stay with you, we won't help you anymore." It sounded like they had helped Gu Qing. Gu Ning, who had been ignored, couldn't help laughing in an ironic way. Lin Lijuan didn't notice Gu Ning until now, but when she looked to Gu Ning, she was amazed at her first glance. Yes, she was amazed because Gu Ning was totally different now. Gu Ning was more beautiful than before, and she didn't abase herself before anyone any longer. She looked elegant to some extent. That makes it sound like the Gu family has ever helped my aunt. As far as I know, my aunt had relied on herself ever since she got married. Gu Ning stared at Lin Lijuan. She didn't bother to hide her complete dislike either. Lin Lijuan immediately wore an unpleasant face. She was embarrassed by Gu Ning's words in public. Then Gu Qing followed up. "Lin Lijuan, let's be clear. We have never ever received your help. Besides, Gu Man doesn't stay with me now." She had indeed never received help from Gu Qinxiang. She wouldn't let Lin Lijuan take advantage of her. "You?" Lin Lijuan's face seemed more unpleasant, but she couldn't deny the truth. After a long breath in, Lin Lijuan lied without hesitation. "Gu Qing, we're relatives. How could I step aside when you need help? The point is that you never talk to us about your troubles. And Gu Man, the old house belongs to the sons of our mother, but we've allowed you to live in there for so many years. We've done a lot for you both. They paid you rent. Besides, it was you who kicked them out when they were in trouble. Gu Qing retorted. Lin Lijuan was immediately mad. That was because Gu Ning hit my daughter and even refused to apologize. They deserved it. She deserved it. Gu Ning met Lin Lijuan's glare without cowardice. You. Lin Lijuan was annoyed as well as surprised that Gu Ning dared to talk to her in that way. The people in the Gu family, especially the younger generation, all respected her the most, but Gu Ning was different. She even humiliated Gu Xiaoxiao in front of Lin Lijuan's face. What do you think you are to hit my daughter? Lin Lijuan said. What does she think she is to insult me? Gu Ning asked back. So what? What do you think you are? You bastard. Lin Lijuan swore at Gu Ning in public. She behaved like a crazy woman. Shut up. Both Gu Qing and Gu Man snapped. They were totally aggravated. Lin Lijuan. Ning Ning is my daughter. I won't allow you to humiliate her.
Gu Man slammed.
Gu Man was gentle or weak to some extent in her daily life. But once Gu Ning was involved, she would become a hedgehog and attack the enemy at once. She doesn't have a father. She is a bastard. Lin Lijuan instead didn't feel guilty at all. At that time, Lin Lijuan only felt that it suddenly went black. When she got her mind back, Gu Ning's face was already magnified in front of her eyes. There was pure coldness in Gu Ning's eyes. Lin Lijuan immediately felt great pressure. She couldn't breathe or move at all. Then Gu Ning said coldly, "Don't think that just because you're older than me, I wouldn't dare to hit you. If I even hear the word bastard from your mouth once more, you'll pay for it." Gu Ning's words were like magic sounds, which sank deeply into Lin Lijuan's mind. She didn't question her words at all, but felt very frightened. "Mom, Aunt, let's go."
Gu Ning ignored Lin Lijuan.
She left with Gu Man and Gu Qing. She didn't want to argue with Lin Lijuan in public, especially when Gu Man and Gu Qing were here too. Lin Lijuan might not want to maintain her dignity, but Gu Man and Gu Qing cherished theirs. When Gu Ning and her families were gone, Lin Lijuan finally got her mind back because of a sound from the woman next to her. Although Lin Lijuan still felt afraid of Gu Ning, she was more mad at Gu Ning who had treated her in that way. Why? How could Gu Ning do that? Lin Lijuan then realized that everyone around gave her a strange glance because she had behaved like a crazy woman. She regretted it immediately and then rushed out. Although Lin Lijuan was always pushy and mean to her family, she valued her appearance in others' eyes very much. However, today she hadn't restrained herself. Gu Qing and Gu Man were both annoyed, but they already knew what kind of person Lin Lijuan was, so they kind of got used to it. Alright, don't be mad at someone who isn't important at all. Let's keep on shopping, Gu Ning comforted. Gu Qing and Gu Man sighed heavily. Actually, they had worried most that Gu Ning would be hurt. However, because Gu Ning remained calm, and they also relaxed a little. After a while they all cheered up. Each one of them had many bags in hand. They bought a lot, not only for themselves but also for Jiangsu and Jiangxinhua. The price ranged from hundreds to thousands of yuan. Each had bought 4 to 5 suits of clothes. Women loved shopping. Although Gu Man and Gu Qing were not willing to spend a lot of money at first, they soon forgot about it while shopping in the mall. After that, they went to buy sheet sets. Gu Ning and her mother bought 4 sets. Each room needed 3 sets for replacement. There were 3 bedrooms in their new house. They naturally needed 9 sets in all. However, there were already 3 sheet sets on the beds in their new house. They were all new too and only needed to be washed. They had also bought 2 sheet sets yesterday, and only needed to buy another 4 sheet sets. Even though the guest room was empty almost all the time, they wanted to make it look cozy as well. Gu Qing's family bought 6 sheet sets for their 3 rooms as well. Those sheet sets were too heavy to carry. Gu Ning also couldn't put them into the telepathic eye space, because it would expose herself. Therefore, they could only get the shop owner to help them with delivery. Not now, but when they were about to leave. There were all kinds of food on the underground floor of the commercial building. Cosmetics were on the first floor, and jewelry on the second floor. Women's clothing was on the third floor. Men's clothing on the fourth floor. Furniture and domestic appliances on the fifth floor, and children's clothes and stationery on were the sixth floor, while musical instruments and sports equipment were on the seventh floor. Gu Ning went down to the second floor to buy jewelry for Gu Man and Gu Qing. Although gold was a little boring, it was suitable for women at Gu Man and Gu Qing's age. Jade would be more suitable, of course, but their jade hadn't been done yet. Gu Ning had to wait for Qin Yifan to come back and take the jade to make jewelry. Thus she decided to buy gold for now. They bought one set each. A necklace, a pair of earrings, a bracelet, and a ring. Gold wasn't expensive. One set just cost around 40 to 50,000 yuan. They then went to get a VIP card in a high-end beauty salon near the commercial building. However, their time was limited today, so they didn't use it right away. After they got the card, it was almost 5 p.m. They also needed to go back home, because Zhang Xinhua was about to leave her school to go home too. They directly took the delivery car with their sheet sets home. The delivery car stopped at the outside of G-Zone, so Gu Ning and her family had to carry all the stuff back by themselves. Luckily, Zhang Xinhua was back and she could help. At the end, Zhang Xinhua carried 2 sheet sets. Gu Qing and Gu Man each carried 4 sheet sets, while Gu Ning carried the rest of the bags. When they were finally home, it was 6 p.m. already. It was time for their meal. Gu Qing called Jiang Su to ask him when he would get back. Jiang Su was already on his way home, so Gu Qing asked him to go buy some food ingredients on his way. Although it was a tiring day, they all had great fun. Zhang Xinhua jumped around with her new clothes in hand. She had never had so many beautiful clothes before. Before Jiang Su got home, everyone was resting. On the other side, Lin Lijuan had been aggravated by Gu Ning. She stopped shopping and went back home earlier. Once she got home, Lin Lijuan kept swearing at Gu Ning and her mother. What happened? Her mother-in-law asked. Although she heard Lin Lijuan swearing at Gu Ning and her mother, she didn't know what had happened. Lin Lijuan then told the old lady everything. What? Gu Ning the bastard threatened you today? Isn't today Monday? Why wasn't she at school? The old lady was also surprised. Hearing that, Lin Lijuan finally realized today was Monday, but Gu Ning wasn't in her school. Who knows? She probably dropped out. Saying that, Lin Lijuan even believed it was true, and slightly felt happy. If she really dropped out, she deserved it. She wouldn't apologize to Xiao Xiao, and even yelled at me. The old lady snorted with anger. She had no sympathy for her granddaughter at all. Oh, did Gu Qing behave against my warning and let Gu Man and Gu Qing stay with her? The old lady asked. I don't know. She said no. Although Gu Qing had denied it, Lin Lijuan didn't believe her. The rent was so high outside. How could Gu Man and Gu Qing afford it? No, I must give them a call. The old lady seemed like she enjoyed humiliating Gu Man and Gu Ning so much. She immediately took out her phone and called Gu Man. Unfortunately, no one answered. Gu Man did it on purpose, of course. The old lady called her after they had had a fierce argument with Lin Lijuan. She must be calling to criticize them. Gu Man didn't want to answer the call at all. Jiang Su had walked around in the construction materials market. There was a good location to open a shop, but it was too small. Jiang Su did have a good choice, but the store was located outside of the construction materials market. It was noticeable and huge, around 300 square meters, and the annual rent was 500,000 yuan. If his business was profitable, he could get the utilities fee back within several months, but if his business wasn't profitable, it would hard to settle a deal within a year. After Gu Ning heard the news, she thought that they had to choose the huge store and run a big business. Therefore, she supported Jiang Su. Although Jiang Su thought it was a little risky, he was happy. Gu Ning understood Jiang Su was slightly worried. She comforted him to do his best. He didn't need to worry about the money. Before Gu Ning went to sleep, she talked with her friends in their Family of Fighters WeChat group. She told them to keep training tomorrow. Anyone who didn't show up before 6:20 a.m. wouldn't get his or her gift. Knowing that, each of them all promised they would show up on time tomorrow. Except for Mixie, the rest all didn't lack money or gifts. However, they lacked meaningful gifts. It had nothing to do with the price. As long as the gift was from Guning, they would be happy even if it was only worth several yuan. The next morning, Guning got up at 5:30 a.m. and left her home at 5:35 a.m. Fenghua Luxury Mansion was 7 to 8 kilometers away from her school. It took her around 25 minutes to get there by running. When she arrived at her school, it was 6 a.m. She went to buy breakfast and coincidentally met Mixie on her way. That girl was pretty early today. Ningning, you're finally back. Seeing Guning, Mixie was super excited. She ran to Guning and held her arm tightly. They seemed very close, but it was quite normal between close friends. Although Guning didn't like to have physical touch with others, she could accept it if the other person was her friend. What do you want for breakfast? It's on me, Mixie asked. Mixie was Guning's close friend, so she didn't reject her kindness. A steamed bun and soy milk, please. They didn't have much time left, so it was convenient to have a steamed bun and soy milk. Both Guning and Mixie bought a steamed bun and soy milk. They went into their school together. Ningning, can you tell me what my gift is? Mixie was curious. Sorry, I can't. I'll show you all when everyone arrives, Guning answered. Fine. Mixie was a little disappointed. There were a few students running in the morning. They met Muka halfway. They were all in school uniforms. Thus Muku actually didn't recognize them from their back at first, but he soon recognized their voices. Hey boss, Mixie. He ran to them immediately. Boss, where is my gift? Muku asked for his gift at once too. Ningning said she would only show us when everyone arrives, Mixie said before Guning could. Muku then had the same feeling of disappointment as Mixie. When they arrived at the football field, it was 6:10 a.m. Chu Peihan came minutes later. She asked for her gift too but got the same answer as well. A few minutes later, Hao Ran and his friends arrived. They ran here and were all out of breath. Boss, where is my gift? Hao Ran asked with excitement. Run 10 circles first. The last one, except for Mixie, will only get his or her gift after the morning class, Guning said. Then she started to run. 10 circles amounted to 4,000 meters.
No.
Hearing that, the boys all shouted in sadness. It was such a torture to them. The last one could only get his or her gift after the morning class. No one wanted to be the last one. No one dared to argue with Guning unless they wanted to get punched, so they had to follow her at the end. It seemed impossible for Hao Ran and his brothers to beat Chu Peihan and Muku, so they decided to compete with each other. They now became competitors for Guning's gifts. Indeed, from the beginning, Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping were left behind. However, they just hadn't caught their breath yet. It didn't mean they were weak. They actually weren't far behind Guning. Guning ran 3 times longer than the others, but with her power she was now much stronger than before. She felt a little tired, but not much. She had run 7 to 8 kilometers from Fenghua Luxury Mansion to her school, but she was simply slightly out of breath. She didn't feel utterly exhausted anymore. Other than Guning, Chu Peihan was the strongest among them. Although Guning didn't know Chu Peihan's background very well, she believed she must have received long-term professional training. Chu Peihan was 1 minute later than Guning after they both had finished 10 circles. It took an ordinary man 3 minutes and 30 seconds to 4 minutes to run a kilometer. The longer you ran, the more tired you would feel. Guning spent 13 minutes on 4 kilometers, while Chu Peihan spent 14 minutes. After running, Chu Peihan was exhausted, but she could still balance her body. Muku was also 1 minute later than Chu Peihan. He almost collapsed on the ground. Mixie, who had run 5 circles, came after Muku. She was worn out too, but after several days of running as training, Mixie was stronger now. The last group was Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan, and then Zhang Tianping. It took him almost 20 minutes to finish the 10 circles. I'm not the last one. Hao Ran laughed excitedly, as if he had been the last one he would have been killed. No big deal. I just need to wait until the morning class is over, Zhang Tianping said airily. Relax, I won't do it. I merely wanted you all to be active, Gu Ning said. What? Boss, you're so devious. Everyone said with one accord, but their voices sounded weak. Gu Ning didn't care. She sat down on the lawn with her backpack, while the others all surrounded her. Honestly, I didn't know what to buy. I basically chose them randomly. These are for you 4 boys. Saying that, Gu Ning took out 4 paper boxes, throwing them directly at the boys. Wow, boss. It's an international brand. Hao Ran raised his voice when he saw the logo on the boxes. Exactly, boss. Have you picked up money on the road?
Muke asked.
Both Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping looking at Gu Ning with curiosity and amazement. They all knew well about Gu Ning's background now. It was barely affordable for her to buy a well-known domestic brand, but she even bought them stuff from an international brand as gifts. What brand? Chu Peihan immediately grabbed the box from Muku. She glanced at it and was shocked. Gee, it's Armani. She also stared at Gu Ning with surprise. Gu Ning didn't answer their questions but took out a bag, giving it to Chu Peihan. When everyone saw the logo on the bag, they all rounded their eyes once more. It was Lancome. Chu Peihan threw the paper box back to Muku at once. She even lost her interest in seeing what was inside. Boss, did you really pick up money on the roads? How generous are you? Chu Peihan took her gift and asked in shock. Gu Ning still didn't answer her question, but took out Yu Mixie's gift and gave it to her. Wow, it's a wallet. Meanwhile, Hao Ran had opened his box. Gee, it's a perfume. Boss, I love you. How could you know I love perfume so much? Chu Peihan was thrilled. She immediately hugged Gu Ning tightly. Gu Ning actually didn't know how much Chu Peihan loved perfume. She could just smell the fragrance every time she met Chu Peihan. Oh, my gift is a phone. Yu Mixie opened her package. She was excited and surprised to see a phone inside. Although she already had a phone, it was old and second-hand. She even felt embarrassed to pull it out. Ning Ning, it must be very expensive. Yu Mixie liked it very much, but it was too expensive in her eyes. Indeed, boss. It may sound a little harsh, but we all know your background. How could you afford such expensive gifts? Chu Peihan asked directly. They couldn't ignore the fact. The rest all stared at Gu Ning. They didn't say another word, but their faces showed their puzzlement. Gu Ning felt warmth in her heart at being cared for by all of her friends. Although she couldn't tell them too much, she decided to tell them something. Therefore, Gu Ning told them she had saved a man's life, and she got a king's green which was worth 10 million yuan as a reward. However, she didn't tell them what she had done in City G. What? The king's green? 10 million yuan. Knowing that, everyone was struck dumb. It was so amazingly unbelievable. Except for Muku and Qin Zixuan, no one else knew much about jade, but they had all heard of the king's green, which was the top type and super expensive. That was why it was worth 10 million yuan for a piece the size of a quail's egg. Yu Mixie excluded, most of them were from rich families, especially Zhang Tianping, who had millions of yuan in assets on his own. However, none of them had ever had 10 million yuan in hand. Even Muku's jewelry store only had several million yuan in assets. Accordingly, 10 million yuan was a huge amount of money in their eyes. Besides, the jewelry in Muku's jewelry store was all made of low-level jade. One ring only cost hundreds of yuan. The king's green was merely a legend to them. Qin Zixuan's family had run a jewelry business many generations ago. He had seen many medium-level jade, but he had only heard of the king's green from books and the internet. After a long while, everyone finally got their minds back. It was so shocking. Boss, you're so awesome. Hao Ran complimented. He now admired Gunning completely. The rest all agreed. Yumixi was envious but not jealous. She knew she couldn't do it. But boss, why didn't you let us have a look before selling it?
Muke complained.
Exactly. It would be more exciting to see the king's green than a superstar. Qin Zixuan said.
No.
I still prefer to see a superstar. Especially my idol Su Zhifan. Chu Peihan immediately became shy and was full of love. Everyone immediately got goosebumps. Alright, I don't want anyone else to know about it. Or I might get robbed someday, Gunning said. Sure, boss. We definitely won't tell others. We'll never tell others. Everyone promised. Great. We need to go back to our classrooms now. Gunning stood up. The group then went back to the teaching building. Gu Xiaoxiao had heard about what had happened at the shopping mall yesterday from her mother. She didn't believe that Gunning had dropped out of the school, but she wanted to check for herself. Therefore, Gu Xiaoxiao kept looking at the stairs from the passage the minute she got to her school. She wanted to see whether Gunning would show up. Gunning is increasingly arrogant now. Not only has she hit you, she has also argued with your grandmother. Now she has even threatened you, mother. I think she is going to despise your whole family, Chen Xiao said. She mainly wanted to add fuel to the flames. Chen Xiao was way smarter than Gu Xiaoxiao. Ever since how Ran and his brothers regarded Gunning as their boss, she had been afraid of Gunning, but she hated Gunning as always. Chen Xiao had never been slapped by anyone, her parents included. She couldn't accept the fact that Gunning had hit her, but out of fright, Chen Xiao didn't dare to annoy Gunning herself. Therefore, she tried to use Gu Xiaoxiao's hands to deal with Gunning. If Gu Xiaoxiao had known about Chen Xiao's scheme, she would have immediately broken off her relations with Chen Xiao. Unfortunately, she didn't know. Instead, she was immediately irritated and retorted, "Impossible. She is a poor bastard. What does she think she is to despise us?" Although saying that, Gu Xiaoxiao did feel threatened by Gunning. Gunning had changed a lot these days. She suddenly became so excellent at fighting, and even made good friends with those rich kids. Thinking of that, Gu Xiaoxiao felt more annoyed and upset. A vicious look appeared on her face. I will ruin her, Gu Xiaoxiao said. Chen Xiao of course was happy to hear that. That was exactly what she wanted. Even though she doubted whether Gu Xiaoxiao could succeed or not, it had nothing to do with her after all. Look, Gunning is coming. At the same time, Chen Xiao saw that Gunning and others were downstairs. Gu Xiaoxiao looked over. There were many people around Gunning, which made her even more jealous. It's so disappointing. She was now eager to ruin Gunning. When Gunning walked into her classroom, she almost knocked into Xiao Feifei. In the past, Xiao Feifei would have sworn at her already, but now she just glared at Gunning without saying a word. Xiao Feifei had the same feelings as Chen Xiao. She hated Gunning as usual, but didn't dare to do anything. They all schemed to do something to get revenge on Gunning. The head teacher came to the classroom during the morning class. She informed the students there would be a monthly test this Friday. When the morning class was almost over, Gunning received a message from Qin Yifan. He was at the airport now and would arrive at City F after 2 hours. He told her to come to Itsue Jade store with her jade if she was free this afternoon. Qin Yifan couldn't wait to see the jade. He knew the jade had to be special, but Qin Yifan would never have expected that it was a top-level jade, even as rare as the king's green. Gunning also wanted to make the jewelry as soon as possible, so she agreed to go see Qin Yifan this afternoon. The break was long, and Chu Peihan ran to the 4th classroom to play with Gunning and Yumixi. Once Chu Peihan appeared, everyone in the classroom felt frightened. They were all scared to be beaten by Chu Peihan. Muku, Hao Ran and his brothers all wanted to go to Gunning as well, but since they were boys, they were afraid it might cause unnecessary gossip for Gunning. Therefore they gave up at the end. Gunning immediately left her school when the morning classes were over. There was a black Hummer stopped by the road outside their school. It attracted lots of attention. The car was so cool. It was a Hummer. It must be super expensive. It cost at least several million yuan. Gu Ning was also attracted by that cool Hummer, but she just gave it 2 glances, then immediately left in a taxi. Gu Ning didn't see the person in the Hummer, but he saw her. Leng Xiaoting was in the driver's seat. Leng Xiaoting showed up for a reason. He just flew here from City G. He wasn't sure Gu Ning would come out this afternoon, but he still came to her school. Coincidentally, he met her. Seeing Gu Ning head off in a taxi, Leng Xiaoting drove his car and immediately followed her. Gu Ning didn't notice someone was following her. She got out at the commercial building, then directly went into the supermarket. She walked towards Itsue Jade Store afterwards. In Itsue Jade Store, Qin Yifan had been waited for a long time. The minute he had landed at 10 a.m., he came to his shop. Although he knew Gu Ning wouldn't show up until 12:30 p.m., he couldn't wait to get here. Normally, Qin Yifan wouldn't stay in the store for longer than an hour for inspections, but this time, he had been here for over 2 hours. All the staff felt nervous and confused. When it was almost 12:20 p.m., he kept looking at the entrance of the store. Therefore, once Gu Ning appeared in his sight, he immediately ran over with excitement. Gu Ning, finally you're here. Come on, show me the jade. Qin Yifan urged. Relax. Let's get inside first. Gu Ning rolled her eyes. It wasn't appropriate to take out such a priceless object in public. Qin Yifan wore an embarrassed smile. He immediately welcomed Gu Ning inside. The minute Gu Ning stepped in, all the staff in Itsue Jade Store recognized her. She had been here with the King's Green last time, which was too shocking to forget. Seeing their boss so excited, everyone thought the girl must have some valuable jade to sell again this time. Thinking of that, the crowd couldn't stay calm any longer. They all fixed their eyes on Gu Ning, but Qin Yifan guided Gu Ning walking to his office. They couldn't see it for themselves and were all disappointed. Once the two were in the office, Qin Yifan invited Gu Ning to have a seat. He then urged, Now can you show me the jade?
Gu Ning smiled resignedly.
She took off her backpack and opened it. The jade was wrapped carefully. She handed it to Qin Yifan. Qin Yifan almost grabbed the package from Gu Ning and opened it at once. When he saw the jade inside, he was shocked dumb. He looked at Gu Ning. It was so unbelievable. This is Fulishu jade. And it was huge. It was universally acknowledged that Fulishu jade was as rare as the King's Green. It was too rare to buy one even if you were super rich. Yes, I plan to use it to make 4 bracelets, 4 pairs of earrings, 4 pendants, and a wide ring. The wide ring is merely the size of your thumb, and the rest can be made into a few pendants or pairs of earrings, Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Qin Yifan took a heavy breath in. Do you want us to design their patterns? He asked. Yes. As for the jade pendants, one should be engraved with a snake, one engraved with a cow, one engraved with a rabbit, and one engraved with a dragon. These are the Chinese zodiac signs of Gu Man, Gu Qing, Gu Ning, and Jiang Xinhua. In the same order, please carve Man, Qing, Ning, and Yu on the back separately. And please do the same thing on the inside of the 4 bracelets. I've already written them down on the paper. As for the earrings, there is no specific request. Just don't be too common, please. For the wide ring, please carve Su inside. As for the rest of the jade, make whatever jewelry you can make. Sure, Qin Yifan answered. He felt like saying something. Gu Ning noticed and she thought Qin Yifan wanted help, so she asked him, Just tell me if want to say something. Qin Yifan still felt a little embarrassed to open his mouth, but after a while he asked, Do you plan to send the jewelry made from the rest of the jade to others? No, I'm going to sell them, Gu Ning said. Knowing that, Qin Yifan was immediately happy. He immediately asked with anticipation, Could you please sell the rest of the jade to me? Qin Yifan wanted to use the foolish jade to make earrings and pendants for his mother. Gu Ning didn't know what to say at first. She had intended to put the foolish jewelry in her shop to attract customers, but since Qin Yifan had asked her, she wasn't willing to turn him down. With her jade eyes, Gu Ning would be able to discover more valuable jade as long as she went to Province Y. Therefore Gu Ning agreed. No problem. Qin Yifan was thrilled to have Gu Ning's affirmative answer. Except for the part that Gu Ning needed to make jewelry, there was enough left over to make another 2 jade pendants and 2 pairs of earrings. Qin Yifan planned to make a pendant and a pair of earrings for both his mother and his elder sister. Qin Yifan also didn't charge Gu Ning for the carving. No matter if he was being thankful, or he simply didn't want to charge Gu Ning, the fee was excluded. Gu Ning insisted on paying the fee in vain, so she agreed at the end. Qin Yifan was always active when Gu Ning was involved. He promised that the jewelry would be done after 3 days. 3 days were more than enough time. Gu Ning still had classes this afternoon, so she didn't stay there much longer. Qin Yifan proposed to send her back, but Gu Ning refused. She didn't want her schoolmates to gossip. Qin Yifan understood, so he gave up. Gu Ning had come here in a hurry and hadn't eaten yet. She planned to eat at the underground first floor before going back. It was almost 1:30 p.m., and Gu Ning still had enough time to eat. Gu Ning ordered her meal and it was soon prepared. While she enjoyed eating, a dark shadow sat down across from her. Gu Ning raised her head. She was shocked when she saw the man. It was him. Why was he here? What? Gu Ning was so surprised that she sprayed rice all over the man's body. Leng Xiaoting was immediately displeased. Gu Ning felt embarrassed. She immediately apologized. Sorry, my fault. I didn't do it on purpose. Please forgive me. She handed tissues to Leng Xiaoting without delay. Leng Xiaoting frowned a little. He took the tissues and wiped the rice off of his clothes. Luckily, he easily cleaned it up after a few wipes. Well, why are you here? Gu Ning asked. Although she asked the question, she already knew the answer. The gun, the man said coldly and didn't say anything else. Gu Ning's face changed slightly. That man was indeed smart. He knew that she had hidden a gun with her, and he had chased her all the way, but so what? She had already hidden the gun in the telepathic eye space. It was impossible for him to find it. Accordingly, Gu Ning soon calmed herself down. She pretended to be innocent. What gun? Knowing Gu Ning wouldn't admit it, Leng Xiaoting wasn't mad but remained patient. The man who has been knocked unconscious by you in private room 503. His gun is missing. You must have taken it away. Why must it only be me because the gun is missing? Gu Ning retorted, although she did take the gun. If it's not you, then it must be the guy who was with you, Leng Xiaoting said. Leng Xiaoting still believed it must have been Gu Ning who took the gun. Gu Ning was speechless. She wanted to say that the hotel manager may have taken it, but she couldn't do it. She didn't want to blame others for what she had done. I didn't take it. I need to attend my classes and I have no time to be talking to you. Bye. Gu Ning didn't know what to say, so she could only run away. She put on her backpack, walking ahead. Leng Xiaoting didn't stop her, which surprised Gu Ning. Did he give up? Gu Ning was wrong. The man didn't stop her but followed her. At the beginning, Gu Ning believed that they might be going the same way, but no matter where she went, he would walk behind her. He was apparently following her. Why are you following me? Gu Ning asked resignedly. Did she have to give the gun back to him? I'll follow you until you give the gun back to me, Leng Xiaoting said. Gu Ning was speechless again, but she was really reluctant to give the gun back to him. Although she knew she couldn't easily get away with it, she wanted to give it a try. Since you believe the gun is with me, you can search for it. Gu Ning stepped forward, like she was prepared for him to search her body. Leng Xiaoting unconsciously stepped back. He frowned a little with a look of dislike in his eyes. I said I didn't take the gun and you won't believe it. Now I let you search for it but you don't want to do it. So please stop following me or I'll call the police. Gu Ning threatened him, then turned around walking away. This time Leng Xiaoting didn't follow her up. He stood there still watching Gu Ning disappear from his sight. However, it didn't mean he already gave up just like that. He simply didn't want to cause a scene. Seeing that Leng Xiaoting stopped following her, Gu Ning was relieved. She wasn't afraid that he'd searched for the gun, but she also didn't want to cause a scene. When Gu Ning got back to her school, it was 5 minutes away from the start of class. Thus Gu Ning immediately ran to her classroom from the gate. However, when she was about to enter the teaching building, someone stood in her way. If she hadn't stopped on time, she would have knocked him over. Seeing that the person was Qin Zheng, Gu Ning was upset. She avoided him, wanting to leave. Gu Ning, can we talk? Qin Zheng asked her at once. Gu Ning hadn't replied to his message on Friday. He had been annoyed, but he couldn't help but worry about her. So he had sent another message to Gu Ning on Saturday. The result had been the same. Qin Zheng had then directly called Gu Ning. Surprisingly, he found out that Gu Ning had already blocked him. He was so mad at Gu Ning that he had decided to not care about her anymore. When he hadn't seen Gu Ning on Monday, he had wanted to ask Mu Ku about it, but felt embarrassed to do so. He had heard about what had happened from Gu Xiaoxiao this morning. I have nothing to talk to you about, Gu Ning said plainly. She wanted to avoid Qin Zheng but was stopped by him again. Gu Ning's cold attitude aggravated Qin Zheng. He said with slight anger, Gu Ning, how could you be so unkind? I just wanted to help after I heard that you had been kicked out of your old house. I am unkind? Help me. Hearing that, Gu Ning laughed in a sarcastic way. She looked at him with dislike. Qin Zheng, is there anyone who've told you that you're very arrogant? You? Qin Zheng was annoyed at being humiliated by Gu Ning. He did want to help her, but she said that he was merely being arrogant. Apparently, Qin Zheng still didn't understand Gu Ning's words. Besides, how come I am the unkind person? Just because I don't want to talk to you? I don't need you help at all. You want to help someone who doesn't need your help. Doesn't it sound ridiculous? Gu Ning didn't hesitate to humiliate him again. Gu Ning, you. Qin Zheng's face turned red, and his eyes were ablaze with anger. Stay away from me or you'll pay for it, Gu Ning threatened him. Then she left directly. Qin Zheng intended to keep arguing with Gu Ning, but hearing Gu Ning's warning, he somehow couldn't say a word. He did feel threatened. At the same time, he also felt greatly humiliated. He wanted to teach Gu Ning a lesson right now to vent his anger. At the same time, he wasn't willing to see anything bad happen to her. The boy now had mixed emotions. On the stairs, Gu Xiaoxiao was glaring at Gu Ning. Obviously, she had seen and heard Gu Ning talking with Qin Zheng just then. Gu Ning ignored her, but when she walked past, she gave Gu Xiaoxiao a provocative look. Gu Xiaoxiao wanted to tear her into pieces right away, but she didn't dare to do it. Why? Why did Qin Zheng want to help Gu Ning? He was Gu Xiaoxiao's boyfriend now. Did Qin Zheng really fall in love with Gu Ning because of her changes recently?
No, impossible.
Even though Gu Ning had changed, she was still a poor girl who could never match with Qin Zheng. Qin Zheng turned around. He saw Gu Xiaoxiao, who was in a rage right in front of him. He immediately knew something was wrong. Xiaoxiao, please don't be mad at me. I just felt guilty about what had happened before, so I want to help her. Nothing else, Qin Zheng explained. But she is fine now, Gu Xiaoxiao retorted. She wasn't criticizing Qin Zheng actually. She was simply dissatisfied to see Qin Zheng wanting to help Gu Ning. I know she's fine now, but we were the cause after all. Do you know, I'm not a cold-blooded person. I've already done evil things because of you. Can you still not believe my loyalty to you?
Qin Zheng lied skillfully.
He was an adept liar. Gu Xiaoxiao felt better after Qin Zheng's explanation, but she still warned him, Don't ever talk to her or help her again. She deserved to be kicked out of the old house. In Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes, Gu Ning was wrong in everything.
Fine, fine.
Class is almost starting. Let's go back. Qin Zheng answered airily. He himself didn't even notice that his attitude towards Gu Xiaoxiao had changed gradually. Gu Xiaoxiao closed her mouth, but she now hated Gu Ning more than ever. After the evening class, Gu Ning failed to notice that Leng Xiaoting was following her again. Even though there were many students in school uniforms in the evening, Leng Xiaoting still recognized Gu Ning from the first glance. However, when he found out that Gu Ning didn't take a bus or a taxi, but ran home, he was surprised. He knew Gu Ning was good at fighting, but it was dangerous for a teenage girl to run home at night. Leng Xiaoting had intended to take the gun back from Gu Ning, but now he somehow felt worried about the girl. He suddenly forgot his real goal, but wanted to protect her secretly. Leng Xiaoting didn't realize it until they were close to Fenghua Luxury Mansion. She lived in Fenghua Luxury Mansion? Leng Xiaoting wanted to approach Gu Ning for the gun, but she greeted a middle-aged man, then walked inside with him. Leng Xiaoting believed that the man was Gu Ning's father, but no matter who he was, Leng Xiaoting wouldn't show up as long as there was someone else with Gu Ning. Therefore, he could only continue to follow her to find out what her address was. The middle-aged man was Jiang Su. Gu Qing wanted to eat fruit, so he went out to buy some. On his way back, he met Gu Ning by accident. On their way, Jiang Su told Gu Ning about the rent for the store. The rent was settled at the price of 500,000 yuan. He had signed a lease of 5 years, and would pay the rent yearly. The store was still in a mess, and the owner needed to clean it up first, so the lease would come into effect from the next Monday. Today was Tuesday, so it was 5 days away. Meanwhile, Jiang Su still needed to deal with many things. He had to register, contact manufacturers, hire staff, and so forth. As for the registration, Gu Ning still believed that it would be faster if she used her network. The first person she thought of was Qin Yifan. If Qin Yifan couldn't help her, she would figure out another way. As for the car, most of the elder generation loved Mercedes-Benz or Bavarian Motor Work. Jiang Su had seen that Gu Qinxiang's car was a Mercedes-Benz. After that, he loved Mercedes-Benz. Therefore, he had bought a Mercedes-Benz as well. He paid 486,000 yuan for the car. Gu Ning didn't say anything about that, as long as Jiang Su liked it. Jiang Su also bought a computer, and the workers would come to settle the network tomorrow. Gu Ning then told Jiang Su to help her get the network set up in her house as well. Gu Ning thought it would be more convenient if she had her own computer. Leng Xiaoting followed them from far behind until Gu Ning arrived at Zone G. He didn't leave until she walked inside. Leng Xiaoting drove his car and made several turns, then arrived at his house. He now lived in Zone C. There were maisonettes one in Zone C. Each house was at least 200 square meters. People who lived in this zone were truly the rich or the authorities. Well, those who lived in the zone of villas were richer or higher in the authorities. Leng Xiaoting didn't live in City F. He actually didn't have a house here either. He was going to one of his close friends Su Jinshan's house. Su Jinshan didn't live in City F either. He was supposed to be on a vacation but was forced to deal with some business here by his boss, so he was living here temporarily. Right now, Su Jinshan was in a gray suit of home clothing. He lay on a white sofa with his arms and legs spread far apart watching TV. He was complaining about the actor's acting skills at the same time. He seemed like a nut who was talking to himself. He didn't have many friends in City F. He only came here for work without any entertainment, so all he could do was stay at home watching TV and talking to himself. Su Jinshan almost hated Leng Xiaoting. Leng Xiaoting seldom came to visit him, but now the man was nowhere to be found. Su Jinshan was so bored. Well, even if Leng Xiaoting was here, he wouldn't talk to him a lot, but at least Su Jinshan wouldn't be as lonely as by staying alone. If it hadn't been for his job, he would have already had a girlfriend. Thinking of that, Su Jinshin was in pain having to watch the actors kissing in the show. Suddenly, some noises sounded outside. Su Jinshin knew that it must be Lung shouting. He immediately sat up straight. As a military man, he couldn't help but behave himself in front of his boss. Otherwise, he would be criticized or punished. Although it was kind of an honor to be punished and trained by Lung shouting, it was a torture too because he was too cruel. Su Jinshin had no intention to torture himself. Shouting, "Where have you been?" Su Jinshin asked. "None of your business," Lung shouting answered. Su Jinshin rolled his eyes. He knew he couldn't get any information he wanted if Lung shouting wasn't willing to tell him. Thus he closed his mouth. Lung shouting changed into a pair of slippers then walked upstairs. It seemed he didn't want to talk to Su Jinshin. Not because he disliked Su Jinshin, but he was always this quiet. People who were familiar with him had all gotten used to it already. Lung shouting stopped halfway all of a sudden. He turned to look at Su Jinshin. "I'll be staying in your place for a while longer. Please help me prepare some clothes." Lung shouting was terrible at choosing clothes. He only wore military uniforms or his black clothing. On the other hand, Su Jinshin's family was involved in the clothing industry, so it only took a call for him to get new clothes. What? Su Jinshin rounded his eyes. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. He wasn't surprised that Lung shouting let him prepare clothes, but because Lung shouting was going to stay here for a while longer. What had happened? Did he finally want to have a vacation? Lung shouting obviously understood why Su Jinshin was so shocked, but he didn't say another word. He turned around and walked upstairs. Su Jinshin finally got his mind back. He smiled. He was happy to see Lung shouting wanted to take a break. To be specific, all the Red Flame team would be thrilled to see that. Actually, there weren't many things the Red Flame team had to deal with. Lung shouting as the captain didn't need to deal with everything in person either. Everyone in the team was super powerful on his own, but Lung shouting's life was occupied with work. If the assignment wasn't very dangerous, he could step aside. However, as long as it was very dangerous, he would definitely join in. They could have 1 or 2 months vacation a year, but he never had a vacation. Accordingly, Lung shouting had been living a super dangerous and boring life. Even his teammates couldn't tolerate it. Many had persuaded Lung shouting to take a vacation, but he wouldn't listen. Since Lung shouting decided to go on a vacation, Su Jinshin made up his mind to help his captain have a relaxing one. Now let's introduce the Red Flame team. The Red Flame team was the highest level military team in the country. Although it was subordinate to the country, it wasn't controlled by it. It had absolute autonomy. That was because the Red Flame team had absolute strength and loyalty to the country. Once the country faced any threat, the Red Flame team would be the first team to protect its country. Although there were only 12 men in the Red Flame team, each person was very strong and super powerful. Moreover, every member of the Red Flame team had an absolute military rank as well as position. Every one of them was also in charge of an army. Lung shouting was the Major General himself. He was the youngest Major General in the country's history. He could win the rank of Major General, not because he had a powerful background, but because he had created extraordinary achievements. As for Su Jinshin, he was a senior colonel with many great achievements, but most of them had been done under the leadership of Lung shouting. His ability was hardly comparable with Lung shouting's. All in all, no one in the Red Flame didn't admire and obey Lung shouting. Although Su Jinshin only ranked a level lower than Lung shouting, that level was a huge gap in reality. Lung shouting was the captain, so he didn't need to tell others that he was going on vacation. If anything happened, his teammates would call him. Gu Ning and Jiang Su went straight to Gu Ning's house, because both Gu Qing and Jiang Xinhua were in her place. Jiang Xinhua was a 9th grade student. She was supposed to have evening class, but her parents were worried about her safety, so they had applied for her to not attend the evening class. Junior high school was not as strict as high school and Jiang Xinhua was good at studying, so it was easy to apply. In high school, especially in the third year of high school, it was necessary to take the National College Entrance Exam. Therefore, if you weren't one of the top 10 in the entire grade, it was impossible to not attend the evening class. Special situations excluded, of course. However, Gu Ning decided not to attend the evening class either after she got good scores at the monthly test. Although she seemed free now, she felt she lacked time, and she couldn't do anything she wanted to. Besides, once her company was established, she wouldn't have time for classes. Now it wouldn't be difficult for her to get good academic results even if she didn't go to the afternoon classes. In the past, whenever Gu Ning was home, she felt lonely, but now she had her beloved families around. She felt happy every day. The two families always gathered together chatting and watching TV. They didn't separate until 12 a.m. Gu Ning checked her phone and spoke to her friends for a while before she went to bed. The next day, Gu Ning got up early as usual, but the minute she left Zone G, she bumped into Leng Xiaoting, who was waiting for her outside. Gu Ning felt upset all of a sudden. The man was literally everywhere. Gu Ning knew that she did something wrong, so she wasn't in mood to blame the man, no matter whether he had followed her or if it was a coincidence. Even she hated being stalked. Leng Xiaoting didn't care about what was on Gu Ning's mind. He walked towards her when she appeared in his sight. "You better give the gun back to me. You're just causing yourself trouble." Leng Xiaoting remained cool, but he didn't threaten Gu Ning the way he normally would. It seemed he didn't want to burden her. "Why can't you believe me?"
Gu Ning strucklet.
Leng Xiaoting didn't say another word, but he seemed determined. Gu Ning knew the man would never let her get away with it. If she didn't give the gun back to him, he would never leave her alone. If Gu Man found out about what had happened when she had been in City G, things would get out of control. Gu Ning almost compromised, but she gave it one last shot. "Well, it's not a big deal even if the gun is missing, right? Military officers never lack guns, right? If you're not one of the military or police personnel, it's illegal to have a gun privately," Leng Xiaoting said. "How about those gangsters with guns? Why don't you deal with them?"
Gu Ning retorted.
"It's not the same case," Leng Xiaoting said. "You must first have proof. Once you have proof, you can catch me," Gu Ning said. "I have the surveillance video as the proof," Leng Xiaoting answered. Gu Ning was speechless. She couldn't argue back this time. Out of shame, Gu Ning didn't doubt Leng Xiaoting's words at all. Besides, he wasn't likely to lie as a military officer. Fine, she did make a mistake. Gu Ning planned to buy one from the black market later. Gu Ning took out her phone, handing it to Leng Xiaoting. "The gun isn't with me right now. Give me your number and I'll bring it to you when I'm free." The gun had been put into the telepathic eye space, so it wasn't appropriate to pull it out now. Leng Xiaoting stopped for a second. He stared at Gu Ning's phone but didn't take it immediately. It seemed he felt awkward to touch a female's stuff, but he didn't feel reluctant in his heart. After a while, he took Gu Ning's phone and typed in his name and number. He used Gu Ning's phone to call his, and then hung up when his phone rang. He then gave it back to Gu Ning. Gu Ning took her phone back. She took a glance, then mumbled, "Leng Xiaoting, you're really like your name. A cold man." Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting frowned a little. Although many people had said he was a cold man, he wasn't willing to hear it from Gu Ning. "All right, I'm going to school now. Please don't stop me on the road again. I'll give the gun back to you later today or tomorrow." Gu Ning ignored Leng Xiaoting and left. Gu Ning had no idea that Leng Xiaoting had deceived her. There was no surveillance video at all. Watching Gu Ning leaving, Leng Xiaoting had mixed emotions. Even though the girl had done something that he always hated, he found it was hard to hate her. When Gu Ning was far away, Leng Xiaoting's face changed suddenly. He lowered his voice. "Get out here now." In the dark, Su Jinshan stiffened. Shit. He wanted to run away but didn't dare to. Su Jinshan had to show up at the end. "Boss, Su Jinchun tried explaining, although he knew Leng Xiaoting wouldn't believe him. Leng Xiaoting didn't give him a chance to explain at all. He said directly, 20 kilometers. Su Jinchun's face immediately turned pale. Although he knew that he would be punished, he felt hurt when the punishment came. 20 kilometers was nothing to a senior soldier from the special force, but he was in a pair of slippers. He was wearing slippers now. This was all because he was curious when he had heard Leng Xiaoting go out early this morning. However, Su Jinchun soon cheered up, because he had just seen a shocking scene. His boss had gone out early this morning to meet a woman, no, a girl. He even recognized that the girl was the female student he had sent to the hospital last week. It was beyond his imagination his boss finally changed. However, the girl was merely 18 and was still a high school student. Was it appropriate if they were together? Anyway, as long as his boss liked her, it was no big deal. Grandpa Leng had already said, as long as Leng Xiaoting was willing to get married, he didn't care about the girl's background at all. However, Su Jinchun had thought too far. There was nothing between Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning. Gu Ning couldn't arrive at her school on time, because she had wasted some time on the way. She told her friends in the WeChat group to run as usual. Anyone who was lazy and didn't finish the task would be punished, and whoever reported it would be rewarded. Although Hao Ran and his brothers had an intimate connection with each other, they also enjoyed laughing at each other. Therefore, everyone was quick to follow Gu Ning's order. 20 kilometers took Su Jinchun almost an hour. It was quite normal for them to run as training, and 20 kilometers was nothing to him, but he was wearing slippers today which were very uncomfortable while he was running. The minute he got home, Su Jinchun went to Leng Xiaoting before he went to shower. "Hey boss, are you dating that young girl?" Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting immediately gave him a cold glance. Su Jinchun stepped backwards unconsciously, but he was so curious that he forgot the danger ahead. He looked at Leng Xiaoting with great curiosity, hoping to get the answer.
No, Leng Xiaoting denied. No?
Then why did you go to meet the girl this early morning? Su Jinchun apparently didn't believe him. Are you totally free now? Leng Xiaoting asked airily, but Su Jinchun sensed the threat in the air. His face stiffened. He knew that if he dared to say another word, he probably would be punished once again. Since you're not dating the young girl, I would like to have a try myself. I don't have a girlfriend now anyway. Both of us live in Finghua luxury mansion, so it will be super convenient if we date, Su Jinchun said while he kept glancing at Leng Xiaoting's face. He wanted to see his reaction. Yes, Su Jinchun did it deliberately. Unfortunately, Leng Xiaoting's face remained the same, which puzzled Su Jinchun. Although Leng Xiaoting remained calm, he felt somewhat uncomfortable in his heart. However, he didn't know why, so he didn't think about it any further. Su Jinchun didn't know what was on Leng Xiaoting's mind, but he knew Leng Xiaoting very well. He never stayed close to a woman if it wasn't necessary. However, this female student was different. He had taken her to the hospital in person last time, and now he had gone to her early this morning. It was unusual. Su Jinchun made up his mind to investigate. Since Leng Xiaoting wouldn't tell him anything, he decided to start with the young girl. At noon, Gu Ning received a call from Zhou Zhenghang. She stepped aside on purpose because it must be business. "Hi, Uncle Zhou," Gu Ning answered the phone. "Boss, is it convenient for you now?" Zhou Zhenghang asked. "Sure, go ahead," Gu Ning replied. "I've already found a designer and 2 engravers. They're willing to work for you like me. I've also found the store and the processing plant. The store is 200 square meters, located in the downtown, and the annual rent is 500,000 yuan. The processing plant is in the factory area, between the antique street and the downtown. It is 160 square meters and 10 minutes away from both sides, not far away nor near. Its annual rent is 250,000. Do you have any opinions, boss?" Zhou Zhenghang said without a break. "No, you can make the decisions," Gu Ning said. Since she let Zhou Zhenghong completely be in charge of the business, she chose to trust him. Zhou Zhenghong actually knew that Gu Ning would agree, but he still asked for her opinion out of respect. Sure, and I've bought the machines as well. They'll arrive in 2 days. A well-decorated apartment is also settled. You can move in any time you want, Zhou Zhenghong added. Great, thanks, Uncle Zhou. I'll be there this weekend and I'll deal with all the documents. Oh, please go and find out whether there are new raw materials in the stone gambling street, Gu Ning said. Gu Ning knew that the sales would go up in those raw materials shops after she had cut out a lot of jade there last weekend. If they had sold a lot, they must also have brought many in. Accordingly, Gu Ning would have many more choices. If there weren't any new choices, it was unlikely to get more jade. Zhou Zhenghong immediately answered, No problem. I'll go find out later. And the car will be available tomorrow. I'll pick you up then. After that, they talked for a while longer before hanging up, but Gu Ning was a little worried after she hung up. What was she going to say to Gu Man if she went to City G this weekend? Oh, she could still use Muku as her cover. She decided to explain to her mother that Muku was going to open another shop in City G, and they needed to inspect it. Gu Ning and her friends went straight to the woods after their meal in the afternoon. However, at the same time there was a fierce fight going on in the woods. No, to be specific, a boy was being beaten up by 3 other boys. The boy huddled on the ground with his head covered by his arms, and let the fists and feet fall down on his body. Not because he didn't want to fight back, but because he couldn't. Then a male voice coldly said, Annie, look at you now. I've disliked you for a long time. Your father is the chairman of Shanghua Real Estate, so I didn't dare to deal with you, but now your father will soon step down from the chairman position. And your slut stepmother and her lover fled with the money. Your family is now in trouble with capital turnover. If you can't get the funds this week, your family will declare bankruptcy. You better go back and advise your father to sell the company to my father. In that case, your family may survive. Otherwise, your family will go bankrupt with huge debts, which isn't good at all. Anyi, wasn't he the boy who had said that he liked her the other day? Also the Shanghua Real Estate, wasn't it one of the 3 largest real estate companies in City F? It had 500 million yuan in assets, and was one of the 3rd-line richest families in City F. What had happened? Gu Ning had an idea in her mind. You never. Annie wanted to retort but shouted in great pain instead. Gu Ning immediately ran in the direction of his voice. Although Hao Ran and others didn't know why, they followed at once. Before long, they all saw 3 boys hitting another boy on the ground with great force. The 3 boys were all strangers, so the one who was being beaten must be Annie. Without further thought, Gu Ning dashed towards them. Those boys were knocked a meter away by a heavy blow before they even realized. They all fell heavily onto the ground. They couldn't even utter a word because of the pain. Hao Ran and others all rounded their eyes, even though they already knew how powerful Gu Ning was. What the F***ck? It was so cool. Annie didn't raise his head until he heard the shriek. He was immediately struck dumb. He glanced at the boys on the ground first, and then surprisingly found that Gu Ning was standing in front of him. Annie felt that it was super embarrassing to let his goddess see him being so pathetic, but since Gu Ning had rescued him, he had to thank her no matter how embarrassed he felt. Thus Annie turned to Gu Ning and thanked her with sincerity. Thank you so much, Gu Ning. You're welcome, Gu Ning said. She looked to Hao Ran and other. Come and help him go to the infirmary. Hearing Gu Ning's voice, Hao Ran and others got their minds back. Zhang Tianping and Qin Zixuan ran to help Annie stand on his feet without delay. Then they walked towards the infirmary. There were bruises all over Annie's body and face. Fortunately, the wounds were only on the skin with no injuries to the bones. He would be fine after a few days of rest. Annie now absolutely couldn't go home alone. So Gu Ning proposed to take Annie home with Hao Ran and Qin Zixuan. Hao Ran had driven to school today. His car was parked in the parking lot outside of the school. And Yi felt embarrassed at first, but he couldn't go home by himself. Moreover, his family was in a mess right now, so it wasn't a good idea to let his family pick him up. On the way, Gu Ning asked An Yi about what had happened. An Yi told her everything afterwards. Just like what the boy had said, An Yi's stepmother along with his father's closest friend, who was the accountant of the Shanghua real estate, had absconded with more than 100 million yuan in liquidity and 300 million yuan in funds just borrowed from banks. Now Shanghua real estate was in a difficult position. If there was no money to keep the company afloat this week, Shanghua would completely go bankrupt. Moreover, with the current situation of Shanghua real estate, it was impossible to borrow money from the banks. An Yi's father was now trying to borrow money from his network, but no one would lend him anything. No one dared to lend over several 100 million yuan to him. Accordingly, An Yi's father could only sell the company to pay the debts. There were several buyers competing with each other, all trying to buy the company at a lower price, so the deal hadn't been settled yet. Although the police were tracking An Yi's stepmother and the man, nothing had changed recently. Hearing that, Hao Ran and Qin Zixuan felt sorry for him, but they didn't have intentions to help him either. The amount of funds needed was so huge, they couldn't afford it. However, Gu Ning made up her mind to buy Shanghua real estate. Shanghua Real Estate was one of the 3 largest real estate companies in City F with a powerful network. Although it could barely stay afloat now, it would recover quickly as long as the funds were in place. It was so much better than if Gu Ning started from the very beginning herself. An Yi's place wasn't far away from the school. They arrived at a high-end area after 20 minutes. Although this area was ranked lower than the Fenghua luxury mansion, it had been built 7 years ago. In the old time, it had been the most popular residential area. An Yi's family lived in a villa. The villa was huge but seemed empty. They had laid off the maid since the company was in trouble. They couldn't afford a maid now. In the study on the 2nd floor, An Yi's father and Guangyao sank into a chair. There was no one else in this house, so it was very quiet. When he heard the sound of a opening door downstairs, he immediately sat up straight. Who? No one else except he and An Yi had the key of this house now, but wasn't An Yi at school? Or was that woman coming back? He thought that it was impossible. That woman didn't dare to come back. With that thought, Guangyao stood up walking outside. When he appeared at the edge of the stairs, he saw An Yi being supported by his 2 schoolmates with bruises on his face and arms. He was greatly shocked. He immediately ran downstairs. Before greeting Gu Ning and others, he worriedly asked An Yi, what happened to you? And Guangyao didn't know what to do now. He wanted to check his son's wounds, but was afraid to hurt him. An Yi knew he couldn't hide it, so he told his father everything. And Guangyao naturally was in a rage after that, but no matter how mad he was, he restricted his anger for now. He had to thank those schoolmates who had saved his son first. And Guangyao didn't disdain them just because they were teenagers. He thanked them with great sincerity instead. Thank you all so much for saving my son. It's nothing, Gu Ning and others said together. Then Gu Ning turned to the boys. Please help An Yi to go to his room and change his clothes. Gu Ning did it on purpose. She wanted to spend some time alone with Guangyao. Oh, please stay here. I'll do it. And Guangyao didn't want to bother them any further. Mr. And it's fine. Please let them handle it, Gu Ning added. Yes, please let us do it, Hao Ran and Qin Zixuan said. Then they directly supported An Yi in walking to the stairs. And Guangyao didn't insist, because it wasn't appropriate to leave Gu Ning alone in the living room. Thus Guangyao invited Gu Ning to have a seat, then handed her a cup of water. Thank you, Mr. An. Gu Ning took the cup. Gu Ning looked at Guangyao, who was just 40, but had aged a lot because of what had happened. Gu Ning didn't want to waste time, so she got straight to the point. Mr. An, nice to meet you. My name is Gu Ning. I know Mr. An's company is in trouble now, and that you want to sell it. And I am very interested in Mr. An's company. I definitely will give you the most reasonable price. How about that, Mr. An? What? Hearing that, Nguyen was really surprised. He couldn't believe his ears. What had happened to the Shanghua real estate wasn't a secret. Nguyen didn't feel surprised that Gu Ning knew about it, but she was merely an 18-year-old student, and she wanted to buy his company? Was it a joke? However, Gu Ning behaved like a calm and mature grown-up. She didn't seem like she was joking at all. Besides, who would ever joke about that? Anyway, it was still hard for Nguyen to believe that a student was able to buy his company. Her family was the real buyer. Thinking of that, Nguyen asked, "Is your family planning to buy it?" "No, I want to buy it myself." Gu Ning actually had the intention to cooperate with Nguyen, so she didn't want to hide. She took it more seriously instead to make him feel her sincerity. "I know Mr. N doesn't trust me because I'm so young, which is quite understandable. I am too young indeed. After all, this is a deal of a few 100 million yuan. However, since it's a deal, we will need a lawyer to notarize it. The deal won't be settled until the contract is signed. Therefore, it would be too expensive for me to trap you, right?" Nguyen stared at Gu Ning. He had no idea what to say. Although he agreed with Gu Ning on what she had said, he felt that it was so unreal. While Nguyen was still in the shock, Gu Ning wrote her name and number on a piece of paper beside the table. She handed it to Nguyen. "Mr. N, this is my number. I think we probably can't talk too much since the time is limited right now, but I do hope you can make your decision after we talk further about this. I'm free this noon and afternoon." Nguyen took the paper. "Sure, I'll consider it." Actually, Nguyen had been convinced already. The other buyers had all given him a very low price. He would lose a lot of money if he agreed to sell his company to them. The moment that Gu Ning finished her talk with Nguyen, Hao Ran and Qin Zixuan came downstairs. Then they left for their school. When Gu Ning and others were gone, Nguyen immediately went to An Yi's room to check on his wounds. Nguyen wanted to ask An Yi about Gu Ning, but gave it up at the end. Although Gu Ning and her friends would tell their head teacher what had happened to An Yi with proof from the infirmary, An Yi's father still called An Yi's head teacher himself. When Gu Ning got back home that night, she found her family were all unhappy. She was then told that her third uncle, Gu Qinyang, and his family would be back to City F this Friday. He even asked to have a meal with them the day after tomorrow. Gu Qinyang didn't live in City F but City G. Both Gu Qinyang and his wife worked in a national department. They lived a good life with a monthly wage of 12,000 yuan. Otherwise, they couldn't buy a house in City G, which was a second-tier city. They had even bought a second house the other day. Their housing fund could cover the house mortgage, and they didn't have to worry about the money at all. Gu Man already had broken off the connection with her mother and Lin Lijuan, so she wasn't willing to go have a meal with them. But it was Gu Qinyang who invited her, so it wasn't appropriate if she didn't show up. Although they weren't intimate, they were brother and sister after all. They hadn't done anything bad to Gu Man, even though they had never helped her either. Gu Ning didn't express her opinion. It was all up to Gu Man. At the end, Gu Man agreed. Therefore, Gu Ning decided to go to City G on Saturday. She knew that those people in the Gu family didn't want to see her, but she was worried about Gu Man. Although Gu Qing and Jiang Su would be there as well, both of them were a little weak. If there was any argument, they wouldn't be able to help at all. Gu Ning didn't remember that she still had to give the gun back to Lung Shouting until she was about to go to bed. Although she was reluctant to do that, she had to fulfill her promise. She had to give it back anyway, so she decided to give it back earlier. Thus she sent a message to Lung Shouting and told him to wait for her at the gate of Zone G at 5 a.m. in the morning. She would give the gun back to him then. If he was late, she would leave directly. Alright, Gu Ning admitted she purposely set such an early time. If he wanted the gun, then he had to be patient. However, when Lung Shouting received the message, he wasn't in City F, so he could only send a message back asking for a rain check. Gu Ning was speechless. She typed and sent, "I want to give it back to you but you're absent. I think the gun doesn't want to go back to you at all. Why don't you leave it with me?" She didn't know whether Lung Xiaoting had seen her message or not, because he didn't reply anymore. The next day, Gu Ning walked out of Zone G. Su Jinshan was in a sports suit and accidentally ran over from the other side towards Gu Ning. He met Gu Ning with a surprised face. "Oh, it's you. What a coincidence. Are you going to school now?" he asked. It wasn't a coincidence at all. Su Jinshan actually did it on purpose. "Yes, are you running at such an early time?" Although Gu Ning barely knew him, she greeted him friendly, given that he had helped her. "Yeah. Do you live here too?" "I live in Zone C and we're neighbors." "Oh, what's your name by the way?" "I'm Su Jinshan," the man asked, although he came to Gu Ning for a reason.
Gu Ning Repliet.
"Nice to meet you. Can I ask you a question? What's your relationship with Xiaoting? Please don't get me wrong. I'm simply curious about that. I grew up with Xiaoting and I work with him now. I have never seen him being with a girl before." Su Jinshan didn't bother to hide. Had never been with a girl? Gu Ning was shocked at first, but then she understood it. Lung Xiaoting was such a cold man. There properly wasn't any woman who wasn't afraid of him. Even Gu Ning felt stressed in front of him. Because Gu Ning had a little disagreement with Lung Xiaoting, she said, "Maybe he is gay. I barely know him. We have just met for several times, so there is nothing between us." "Gay." Hearing that, Su Jinshan was astonished for a second, then snorted with laughter. "Ha ha ha, we thought the same thing before. But I promise you Xiaoting is definitely not gay." "Oh, have you tried?" Gu Ning put on an evil face. Su Jinshan immediately understood and argued, "Nonsense. I have never ever done that. I like women."
Gu Ning srucket.
"Maybe he only likes himself."
"Ah, Jure Sofanni."
Su Jinshan laughed again. "Yeah, maybe you're right. He is in love with himself." After a while, Gu Ning said, "Sorry, I have to leave for my classes." "Oh, right." Su Jinshan didn't want to bother her any longer. However, he didn't believe that there was nothing going on between Gu Ning and Lung Xiaoting. Otherwise, why had Lung Xiaoting come to meet her so early in the morning? Maybe Lung Xiaoting was still chasing her. Ever since Chu Peihan, Hao Ran and the others had regarded Gu Ning as their boss, they almost didn't miss a class afterwards. All of their teachers and classmates found it very odd, but for those teachers they were very happy to see it. The last thing that the head teacher wanted to see was that there were students who were absent from classes. After the morning classes, Gu Ning received a phone call from Nguangyao on her way to the canteen. He wanted to talk to her about the acquisition deal. Gu Ning didn't feel surprised that Nguangyao came to her. She assumed that he would call her this noon or afternoon. Gu Ning also wanted to settle the deal soon. Even if she had no time, she would make an effort to be available. Gu Ning left the school after she told her friends that she was going out. Although her friends were all curious, they didn't ask since Gu Ning wasn't willing to tell them. Everyone had their own secrets. For Gu Ning's convenience, Nguangyao met her in a nearby restaurant. It only took a dozen minutes to get there by walking. Nguangyao had already arrived. Since the deal was very important, Nguangyao booked a private room. "Miss Gu, nice to meet you. Please have a seat." When Gu Ning stepped inside, Nguangyao immediately stood up and welcomed her. He treated her with great respect. Indeed, dignity had nothing to do with age in front of power. The minute that Gu Ning sat down, Nguangyao let Gu Ning order first. Gu Ning didn't hesitate. She ordered 2 dishes while Nguangyao ordered 1. 3 dishes would be enough for them. They got down to business before the dishes were even on the table. "Miss Gu, the most reasonable price for Shanghua real estate is 400 million yuan. What's your opinion?" Nguangyao asked. 400 million yuan wasn't much, but was much higher than the offers from other buyers. Businessmen valued profits most, so they all wanted to gain the most at the lowest price. However, 400 million yuan was just enough for Nguangyao to pay his debts. He could only keep his house and a car at the price of 1 million, but he would still have to sell the house and the car for money to support his family. No problem. Gu Ning agreed without second thought, which surprised Nguangyao. He didn't know what to do all of a sudden. Actually, Gu Ning couldn't pay 400 million yuan right now. Her own company needed 100 million, and she only had 300 million yuan left, but she planned to go to City G this weekend for stone gambling. If she could cut out more jade, she could sell them. If not, she still could sell some that she had stored in the telepathic eye space. Thus she said, "However, I only have 300 million yuan in cash with me now. I'm afraid we must wait until after this weekend to sign the contract." "Sure." Nguangyao agreed. He understood that it took time to collect the money to buy a huge company. Therefore, it wasn't a problem to wait for a few days. Besides, the Shanghua real estate could still run for around a week. "Mr. And actually, I like a win-win situation more," Gu Ning suddenly said. Nguangyao was struck dumb for a second. He didn't know what the meaning of Gu Ning's words were. He asked, "Miss Gu, what do you mean?" "I don't know whether the police can help you get the money back. If they get the money back, it won't be hard for you to run the business continuously. However, if the money is lost like that, you will be in a great trouble." "Thus I have an idea," Gu Ning said. "What idea?" Nguangyao asked. "Mr. N, you must also know that I am only a high school student. I don't have time to run a company myself. So I want to find someone with the ability to help me. Mr. N, you're the founder of Shanghua Real Estate. You have everything a chairman needs. Therefore, I intend to hire you to continue to serve as the chairman of Shanghua Real Estate. In other words, I'll stay behind the scenes. In return, you'll get a very generous salary and 20% shares of the company. Moreover, you will have the absolute right to manage the company. Under normal circumstances, I won't interfere with your decisions, unless it is necessary, or you can't decide on what to do. Mr. N, are you willing to do that?"
Gu Ning sighed.
Nguangyao was totally shocked to hear that. What? A very generous salary and 20% shares of the company to hire him as the chairman with absolute right over it? 20% of the shares wasn't a small amount of money. That was literally a free lunch out of the blue. Nguangyao felt that it was so unreal. However, he had to admit that he was eager to accept it, because he really didn't want to leave Shanghua Real Estate. He had spent half of his life to build Shanghua Real Estate. He was the only person who knew what he had been through for the company. However, it was too good to be true. Nguangyao cautiously asked, "Miss Gu, 20% shares are not a small amount. You also want me to be fully in charge of the company. Are you sure this isn't a joke or a lie? Besides, why do you trust me? Mr. N, you're in a mess now only because you've met those evil people. However, you can't deny your ability. Your ability and your network can help me save a lot of effort. You also need to manage the company as usual, but actually you're working for me. Now do you still believe you're the one who benefits the most from the deal?" Gu Ning said to comfort him. Nguangyao thought what Gu Ning had just said was reasonable. He was immediately relieved. Gu Ning added, "Besides, I never doubt my employees. If you treat me with sincerity, I'll give you a thriving future. But if you betray me, you'll be dead. No way around it." Gu Ning said the same thing to Nguangyao as what she had said to Zhou Zhenghong. She promised and warned together. Gu Ning even delightedly threatened Nguangyao when she was saying the word, dead. Nguangyao immediately felt that it was hard to breathe, as if he had sensed the smell of death. He was now completely shocked by an 18-year-old girl's power. Compared with Zhou Zhenghong, Nguangyao was more sophisticated. He believed Gu Ning must be an extraordinary girl. However, he had no intention to guess Gu Ning's real background. As long as he could feel Gu Ning's sincerity to hire him, he was willing to work for her. Even though Gu Ning hired him for his ability and network, she did help him a lot. Therefore, Guangyao had no reason to refuse. He wasn't an idiot. I personally look forward to working with Mr. N very much, but it's all up to you. You can make the decision on your own, Gu Ning said. However, she already knew Guangyao would agree. Guangyao finally got his mind back. He felt like crying, but he forced himself not to. Suddenly, Guangyao stood up and bowed to Gu Ning. He said with seriously, "Miss Gu, thank you so much for your trust and generosity. I promise that I'll manage the company as always. I'll never let you down." Since Guangyao accepted the deal, Gu Ning was his boss from now on, but Gu Ning wasn't an arrogant person. No matter what had happened, Guangyao was much older than her. She didn't want to be disrespectful. Thus she stood up at once. "Mr. N, it's a great pleasure to work with you." Gu Ning held her hand out to Guangyao. They shook hands and the deal was done. There is also another very important thing. What I need is a company with the absolute right to make decisions. That is to say, this company must be completely in the control of you and me. I don't like to argue a lot before making decisions. No one can build a thriving business on quarrels. Those who like arguing could do nothing with the money. So I will remove all shareholders. There will be only 3 shares of Shanghua. I'll have 70% shares and you'll have 20% shares, while the other 10% shares are for the market. If they want to stay in Shanghua, I will arrange suitable positions for them. However, I only want loyal people, Gu Ning said with determination. She wouldn't give up on that because she didn't need to find fun like others. She wouldn't allow anyone to do nothing while being paid. Hearing that, Guangyao was astonished again. This girl was really ambitious. However, he respected her ambition. No one would want outsiders to share his or her own properties. Like what Gu Ning had said, many people would do nothing but argue while being paid. Especially when it came to settling deals, many of them would disagree with each other. Then they would start to argue a lot. Guangyao knew that so well. Some were cowards who were afraid to take risks, so they stopped the project. Accordingly, the project couldn't move on smoothly. Right now, Guangyao admired Gu Ning's determination more than ever. He was also more confident about the future ahead. At that time, the dishes were put on the table, so Gu Ning and Guangyao began to eat. Since the time was limited, Gu Ning seized every minute to talk about the business. She opened her mouth. "Oh, how do you manage the construction materials? The manufacturers never sell goods to the outside, so we turn to agencies for the materials," Guangyao said. "Is the building materials you need to build the community a one-time contract with the agency?" Gu Ning asked. "Not really. Because the general communities are built in 1, 2, or 3 phases, we sign the contract according to the phase. The first phase of Shanghua is currently under construction. The second phase will soon begin. If the seller isn't satisfied with the construction materials, he can stop renewing the contract, but that rarely happens because the seller will normally use a brand for a long time," Guangyao said. Knowing that, Gu Ning was relieved. "Mr. N, actually, my uncle is preparing to go into the business of construction materials, and I'm considering letting him be the agency of the construction materials for Shanghua real estate. Of course, I also have my own bottom line. I will only help him because he has the ability. So please don't worry that I'll lower the standards of the project, because I want to help my family. If so, I would rather give him an amount of money instead. I also don't plan on letting my family know about my properties. After all, I am too young now and I don't want them to worry about me. So please don't worry about our connection, but run the business as usual," Gu Ning said. Although she handed the company over to Guangyao, the property would soon be hers. She naturally had the right to control it, and she would make full use of it. Guangyao didn't think that it was inappropriate, so he happily agreed. "Oh, Mr. N, do you know someone in the Industry and Commerce Bureau? My uncle's company hasn't registered yet. I want to settle it as soon as possible," Gu Ning said. "It's easy. I'll deal with it. And Guangyao answered without delay. And Guangyao was one of the richest men in City F. He definitely knew someone with the power. Although the Shanghua real estate was in trouble now, he still had his network to help him before he went bankrupt. Besides, it was not a big deal. As long as you have prepared the documents, it would be super easy to get it done with the help from the authorities. After the meal, Gu Ning went back to her school. In the afternoon, Gu Man called Gu Ning to come home soon. Jiangsu had gotten his car, so they all wanted to celebrate. On her way home, Gu Ning received a call from Guangyao. He had already dealt with the Industry and Commerce Bureau. The registration would be done within a week. When Gu Ning got home, everyone was so happy at getting a new car. Gu Qing and Gu Man had gone with Jiangsu to get the new car. It was the first time they had ever been in such an expensive car, so they were all thrilled. After Gu Ning got back, both Gu Man and Gu Qing dropped the vegetables they had been washing and talked to Gu Ning for a long while about the new car. Gu Ning felt like laughing. When they went back to cook, Gu Ning finally had time to tell Jiangsu about the registration. Gu Ning only told him that she had turned to a schoolmate's father for help. She had a good relationship with that schoolmate, so his father kindly helped with this as soon as this afternoon. Gu Ning also revealed a little about the deal of supplying the construction materials. Her classmate's father was doing real estate. If Jiangsu was willing to be the dealer of the construction material, he would cooperate with him in the future. Knowing that, Jiangsu was excited, but he also felt ashamed that Gu Ning had dealt with everything for him. Although Gu Ning had said that she wouldn't interfere in his business, Jiangsu didn't mind what she had done today. Besides, everything Gu Ning had done was a big obstacle to him. She had helped a lot. It was a Friday, and the monthly test was about to begin. Gu Ning and her friends gathered together at the football field as usual, but they didn't run. They were simply chatting while walking around. I hate tests the most. They won't make any difference. If my family didn't force me to come to school, I really would like to drop out, Hao Ran said with annoyance. Studying was a hateful nightmare to him. Me neither, but I must keep on studying, Chu Peihan said. That was the reason why she still could get good scores even though she missed a lot of classes. She played hard but also studied hard. Moreover, some people were born intelligent. They spent much less time on learning but gained much more than ordinary people. Chu Peihan was one of them. Actually, Hao Ran and the boys were smart too. Otherwise they couldn't run their bar so well. They just weren't interested in studying. If they had been willing to study hard, they would have been good students as well. Their scores were better than the old Gu Ning anyway. They remained in the worst classroom, the 7th classroom, only because they liked playing and causing trouble. I think it's better to keep on studying in school, even if you have a good family background and you don't lack anything. Your parents can't support you for a lifetime. In the future, you have to inherit their enterprises. If you don't have the ability, you'll be eliminated or replaced by the strong. Ability requires rich professional knowledge, social experience, and an extensive network, and the university is the best place to learn knowledge. Muku, who was always an excellent student, said. Muku is right. University is important, Gu Ning agreed. I'm absolutely going to a university, and I'll work hard to achieve a lot, so that my family can live a good life. Yu Mixi had great hope for her university. She so badly wanted to change her and her family's lives. You will. Gu Ning encouraged her. Gu Ning wouldn't let Yu Mixi stay poor after all. She would help Yu Mixi to grow up and be successful one day in the future. She would wait until her business empire was established. They went back to their classrooms separately. The monthly test was almost the same as a usual test. The first was a Chinese test in the course of 2 classes, 100 minutes in all. One could hand the paper in half an hour after the test began, but no one had ever done that before. Even if they didn't know the answers, most people would not hand the paper in until the time was over. Gu Ning spent the time of a class to finish the Chinese paper. She handed the paper in, then left the classroom. Everyone was surprised to see that. It was beyond their imagination that Gu Ning would be the first one. She had always been the last one to hand the paper in the past. Everyone knew she wasn't good at studying, so they assumed that she must not know the answers at all, so handed the paper in earlier. It was acceptable to hand the paper in at that time, so the teacher didn't say anything. However, when she saw Gu Ning's paper, she was shocked. The paper was well done in good handwriting, and all the answers were right. The writing part almost got a full score for her outstanding skills. Of course, the teacher wouldn't give a full score to the writing part. 1 or 2 points would normally be deducted. Because Gu Ning had helped Yu Mixi studying these days, Yu Mixi knew that Gu Ning had improved her studying. She was even better than her. Thus she knew Gu Ning must have done a good job. Gu Ning went to the garden after she had handed the paper in. She was used to being alone, so she didn't feel bored at all. However, only 5 minutes later, Hao Ran and his brothers came to her. They had an agreement to come to the garden once they finished the test. Hao Ran and his brothers couldn't finish the paper at all, so they handed the paper in early. When they saw Gu Ning, they were all astonished. They had heard that Gu Ning was bad at studying, so they believed that Gu Ning had been in the same situation as them. Thinking of that, Hao Ran asked, "Boss, did you finish the paper? Or did you barely know the answers?" "I finished it,"
Gu Ning said.
"Wow. What score do you think you will get?" Qin Zixuan asked. 90%. To get 90% you had to get above 90 points. Hao Ran and his brothers were all amazed. "Are you sure?" Hao Ran found it unbearable. Who said that Gu Ning was bad at studying? Gu Ning obviously knew why they were shocked. When she had helped Yu Mixi with her assignments, Yu Mixi was surprised too. "You'll know when the results are out." Gu Ning didn't explain further. Fine. Since Gu Ning didn't want to tell them, they stopped asking. Then Hao Ran said, "Boss, today is Friday. Let's go have some fun in our bar tonight." This was the second time Hao Ran had invited her. It wouldn't be appropriate if she rejected again. "Sure. When and where?" "I'll come to you. After the test we can have dinner together, then we can go there together," Qin Zixuan said. "Not today. I have to eat at home." "I'll be a little late," Gu Ning replied. "Okay. It is in Yongla Road, the V5 bar. It's the letter V and the Arabic numeral 5. It's the mighty homonym, and is also the meaning of mighty, haha," Hao Ran said. "Wow. I like the name," Gu Ning complimented. Although Hao Ran and his brothers were all proud of the name, they felt a little shy when Gu Ning complimented it in front of their faces. Mu Ku and Chu Peihan arrived 25 minutes before the test ended. Although they were both academic, it was rare to finish the test within 75 minutes. Besides, they barely wrote down wrong answers. Gu Ning was faster than them only because she had her special power. Yu Mixi was the last one of them to arrive. She arrived 10 minutes before the test ended. When everyone got there, Hao Ran told them that they were going to the bar tonight. Hearing that, Chu Peihan was the most excited. Although she had been to many bars, she had been there with her elder brother every time and her freedom had been limited. Mu Ku also agreed to go. Only Yu Mixi didn't know how to explain it to her family, so she couldn't go with them. Hao Ran told Yu Mixi she could tell her parents that it was a classmate's birthday party. If her parents wouldn't believe it, they could buy a birthday cake and pretended that they had a birthday party. Then they could send some photos to her parents as the proof. A birthday cake wouldn't cost much, so they planned to eat it as dessert. Hao Ran's idea was approved by everyone. They all decided to do that. Even Gu Ning had to use that excuse for her mother, Gu Man, but Gu Man knew Gu Ning's friends, so it would be easier for Gu Ning to use that excuse. After the Chinese test ended, the teacher went back to the office and spoke